Hey everybody, Jess, Intuitive Angel Healer here with your Grounded. Thank you so much for joining our podcast today and welcome to another episode of Your Angels Are Talking. Are you listening? Inspirational stories of angelical and universal miracles. This podcast is all about the magic that the universe contains and to help open your eyes and mind to the fact that we turn a blind eye to spirit, and this causes us to miss out on the joy and beauty each day holds. Abundance is all around us and comes in many different forms, but how often do we take time to count our blessings? Say thank you. Say thank you to the universe just for waking us up today, or just be content with the love inside our souls. If you are wondering or asking yourself right now, how do I break up with fear and embrace the miracle of my angels so I can create the life I desire? Well, the universe has brought you to the right podcast. Today, we have a very special guest who may just turn you into a believer if you aren't already. So if you can please welcome to our show today, Dean Fox. Hello, Dean.
Hi, Jess. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic, thank you, and I really appreciate your invite to the show.
Awesome. I am so humbled that you are here today for our show. Dean is from Middlesbrough, England, in the UK. He's a leading mindset coach, trainer, consultant, entrepreneur, and speaker. And today he is coming to bring a special story of his journey of how and his encounter with spirit. His story touches me very deeply because I have and just a note at the beginning of this, we are going to be talking about, a taboo subject of suicide. I don't think it should be taboo, but unfortunately, I want to give that out to people that we are talking about this because I've experienced it in my life, unfortunately, with friends. I had a friend as young as 16 years old who, unfortunately, and I know Jerome is here with me right now, this leads us into this beautiful man's story that, money isn't everything and spirit and love is everything. And so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and hand it over to Dean and tell us this amazing story of how you just changed your whole total mindset.
Okay, well, thanks for the intro. My story will touch on a few subjects I think that is not often discussed. I don't think in the way that it should be. I think that particularly from a male perspective, we don't talk about this often enough. So I'm always glad when I get an opportunity to share my story in the hope that it not only raises awareness, but also that if there are people out there who are feeling the way that I was feeling at the time, then they take something from it and hopefully reach. But my background, I had a corporate career. I was in sales and business development and marketing, and but right throughout my journey, from starting my first job as a young man, right through to when I ended my corporate career, I was always looking for the next best thing. I'd started on the same kind of journey and treadmill that I think the vast majority of people are conditioned to believe. You talked about money not being everything, but we grew up normally in a society that directs us down this path of that success is in material things, constantly striving for that, the next best job, a new car, a bigger house, a higher salary. And I continue to do that. But every time I made that next step and achieved the next bit of success, it made me feel better. And it maybe did for a while, but there was no real fulfillment. And I was continually seeking for something. And I made this decision that in the early 2000s, that having made it to, what for most people was, a great career position. I was a national sales manager for a blue chip company in the UK. I ran a team of salespeople up and down the country with a company expense account, company car, all of the trappings that went with it. And most people on the outside would have said, well, that's it, you've made it, that was success. But like I said, I didn't really feel that way. I kept thinking there must be more. I still don't feel like I've achieved, like I'm successful. And so I made a decision to leave the corporate world and I'd go into business for myself. And again, it was born out of a decision that, well, maybe that's what's missing. If I do this for myself, then perhaps that will make me feel good enough. That will show everybody that I'm good enough. That'll demonstrate my success. And so I left the corporate world, went to work, set up my own business with my wife, and we were in what you would call real estate in the US, so property development and investment in the UK. And between the early 2000s up to 2007, we built a really strong business. We multiple six figures, touching seven figures as a business. We had, again, all of the things that most people would associate with that. Nice car, nice home. One of the properties that we built, we kept. It was our own home. But we couldn't foresee things that are going to happen. And I talk a lot about this idea, and you mentioned it when we spoke earlier, Jess, about this idea that we don't always know why things happen, but there is always a reason. We're being guided in some way, shape, or form.
Yes.
And we can't really see it at that time. It's difficult sometimes to see why. But in end of 2007, early 2008, obviously we had coronavirus right now, but we had what I'd experienced was the worst financial crisis that I'd come across. And literally, it was almost overnight. Everything in our business changed. So everything we'd done previously as a model for our business no longer worked the next morning. It was like someone's turned a tap off. And over a very short space of time, we ended up that placed us under some difficult periods, some financial pressures. Over the following 12 months, we lost some other investments that we'd made as well. And I'd come to a point, I was finding it difficult at that point in time, but I made a decision. I said to my wife that the only way I could see out of it would be that I could just go back to what I knew at the time. I could go back in the corporate world and get a job. It may not be what I had before at the same standard, but it would probably tide us over this difficult period. It would probably see us through this financial difficulty. And so I decided to do that. And that was probably late 2009, end of 2009, I'd made a formal decision. That's what I was going to do. And I started to reach out to some of my contacts and say, look, I'm looking for a position in the corporate world again. And then in March 2010, when it looked like I could potentially secure something, my wife and I were involved in a road traffic accident. My wife and I and my youngest son at the time. And that was a fairly serious accident. It took 2 hours to cut us from the vehicle. The road we were on was closed for 4.5 hours. They airlifted my son to hospital. So, it was a fairly serious incident. And that did two things. First of all, it meant that my decision to see us through by going back into the corporate world and just getting a job wasn't possible. I was, medically not able to do that from a physical perspective. My wife had her own business at the time, so she couldn't work either. That period of time, there was about maybe 8 months or so. The whole recovery took about 12 months plus, but about 8 months of that, we were unable to do anything. And that obviously added even more financial pressure. We had zero revenue coming in and still all the usual overheads that a family has. But for me personally, that also added some extra kind of mental, psychological pressure. As men, we grow up with this kind of idea that, we're the head of the household. It's our responsibility to look after the family, all of those kind of cliches. And those internal pressures, if you like, my own personal pressure for that, as well as difficulty of coping with what was going on, both from a psychological perspective in terms of, was I good enough to do the things that I wanted to do? Was it my fault we were in this position? All of those doubts that started to appear added to the financial pressure. I went through a really, really difficult period myself. And again, we as men, we're also not very good at talking about things either.
Not a lot of men in my life are good, in the past of my life have been good at talking about things, so I understand.
Yeah, so we rarely share those sorts of things, even with people really close to us. So I found it really difficult to share with my wife and my family. because I felt that they were looking at me for guidance and strength, and I didn't want to show that I didn't have it. What that led to was in December of 2010, I reached a point where I didn't feel like I had anything left. I gave nowhere to go, and I kind of started having thoughts about the fact that the world, my family and the world, would be a better place without me. About 2 weeks before Christmas, here in the UK, and I'd left home on the morning. I'd said to my wife Christine that I was going out for a walk, and I said I need to clear my head today. I need to just kind of find some space for me. And I left in the morning to go for a walk. The truth of the matter was I wasn't going to clear my head. I had no intention of going home that day. I left home. I walked to a woodland near where I lived, with the intention that I was going to end my life that day. Looking back, I see these things now, but I couldn't. That's what I said about things happening for a reason. At the time, it just looked black. I couldn't see any other way out. But something strange happened that day, and it had happened once before, and again, I would never have known why. But in the car accident, there's a point in that accident where I felt like I'd actually died, as if I was dead, but I was still aware of things. It was a strangest, surreal moment. And I had no fear, no pain, no stress, no worry. I was extremely calm. And I don't know how long it lasted, whether it was seconds or minutes or longer than that. But it was just a real surreal moment. And I could never have explained how I felt and why I felt. I put it down to, the drugs I was getting at the time and all those sorts of things. But that day when I'd gone to the woodland, I came to a clearing in the woodland, and I sat there and I made a formal decision. I actually said to myself, right, this is it. I'm not going back. Everyone will be better off if I'm not here. And I made a decision that I was going to end my life. But at that particular point in time, I had exactly the same feeling that I'd had in the car accident. For that split second, having made a decision, I felt no pain, no stress, no worry, no fear. It all went away again. And at the time, all I could say was it gave me enough breathing space, enough clarity to ask myself a question. And the question I asked myself was, I could have died 9 months ago in a car accident, and everybody at the time said there was no reason how or why we managed to survive that. The first responders there on the day said it was impossible that you should get out of that vehicle, and with the injuries that you didn't find at all. The question I asked myself was, I could have died in that incident and I didn't. Why not? Why did I survive that and go through all the things I've gone through only to potentially end my life myself today? Why would that be? There must be a reason for all of this stuff. What am I supposed to get from it? What am I supposed to be doing? And again, I couldn't answer those questions, but they were enough for me to start to say, well, maybe I should explore that. Maybe I should try and find out why I'm going through this, and why I'm here right now in this space, and why I've been affected by the things I've been affected by. Those questions were enough for me to go back home that day. That started my journey. It didn't change overnight, but it started my journey. I started to ask questions about myself. Who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? All of those sorts of things. And over the last 10 years, I've kind of devoted my time to investigating that. People talk about being the best version of you and all those sorts of things, but it was really just about understanding who I was and what I was supposed to be there and why I went through all those things. And I say now that, people talk about their purpose in life. And I said this the other day to somebody, we were having a conversation, and I said, I don't believe that you find a purpose. I believe the purpose claims you. It just kind of says, but this is what you should be doing all along. It was a good few years after that, as I'd started my journey, that I started to share my story. In the early days, I would never have told anybody this story. I wouldn't have shared how I got to where I was and why and how I felt. But I was asked to share my story, and I shared it one day, and it had such a profound impact, not just on the people who listened to it, who came up to me and said, it was fantastic, I'm really inspired, but on me, on the fact that I could share it. It had a real profound impact on me. And I suddenly, again, at that kind of time, I started to realize that this is as much about developing me as it is about helping other people. And the more I share this story, the more it helps me. And so I set about just sharing it. And I had no intention of being a coach or a speaker, as I said. Those things came to me. They were, people came to me and said, would you be able to help me? And that's what I enjoy doing. I've now found that what my purpose is to share my story and to help people to see things from a slightly different perspective. Because I know how difficult it can be to see that in times of difficulty. I have a saying often that I use. In fact, I was with one of my clients this morning and I said the same thing, which is that when you're in the picture, it's really difficult to see the frame.
Yes.
And, you know, when you're going through something, it's really difficult to step outside and take that viewpoint. And you often need somebody else just to kind of help you see the frame of the picture so that you can look at it differently with different eyes and then realize perhaps, okay, so there are different things that I'm not seeing because this is where my focus is. And so I spend most of my time doing that.
I love it. I love your story and I love your bravery, and thank you for not ending it that day, because we really need you here. You really touched my heart with this because my dad died at 42, something around there, 44. He must be here with me because I goosebumps. But he was brought up in Eastland, Texas, West Texas, and USA is a very dense, closed-minded place, especially back in the 50s. And it's gotten better, but like the mindset there was very closed off, and you were a man, and his dad was an oil for Gulf. He worked in the oil field, so he was a man, and you didn't cry. And I remember being a kid, I got some of this tough love from them. And even the women in my family were like, stop crying, you know, like, and they didn't like, I don't feel like they really enjoyed me because I was a girl, because even the women out there are very like hard. It's crazy that my dad killed himself his whole life with alcohol because nobody ever told him it was okay to go cry and feel better. And that's what you need to do, is you can't hold all this in. So I really feel that my dad died from a broken heart, not just a heart attack, because he had so much inner child. And now that I work with chakras and I'm an energy healer, I learned that we store so much in our heart chakra and close it off. And that's like the motor for all, it's like the center. It does you got to have your up and your down chakras. So if you don't have the motor going and you close it off because you're sad or you feel guilty or shame, that's where people get heart disease, and it just keeps tumbling. So I think that's awesome that you finally got the courage, and that's a good message for men out here to really have. It's okay, because I've met so many guys that they don't want to share their feelings because at some point they were shamed in not being a man if they said what was bothering them. So now we get to play games of what's wrong with you, what's really wrong with you, because you're not going to tell us. We're going to, you know, dance around this until one day you get tired of it and you actually tell me what's wrong. So kudos to you. I love it. You're like one of my favorite guests I've interviewed so far on the male side. And I love it. I got some more guys coming in because I want this message to really get out to the men out there, because you're not less of a man in my eyes if you talk about it. You are less of a man if you go beat someone up because you have anger issues. And that's what my dad taught me. And that's what also builds on top is the anger. And it's a whole tumble down. So I love it that you're here, that you're spreading a message. I want to ask you a couple questions to kind of reflect on your story here. How has this experience permanently changed your daily mindset?
There's a couple of things, but the one biggest thing that sticks with me a lot is, I alluded to in this earlier on in my story, that I was on this kind of what I call the when then mentality, this finish line mentality, that, you know, when I get this, then everything will be okay. When I've achieved this, then I'll be happy. When I've earned this, then I'll be successful. You know, when other people see this, when I have this car. And that's one of the biggest things that changed, is I learned over the last decade, more importantly than anything else, was that happiness is not something that I get. It's something that I am. It's something that I have. And as soon as I started down that road of, okay, so if I'm just happy with whatever I have, regardless of what it is, so long as I'm happy, nothing else really matters. And it's difficult to explain to people until they've experienced it, but the shift in that on a daily basis is huge, because you start to attract things that are aligned with what makes you happy in the first place. So instead of going after them thinking this is going to make me happy, you just start from the point of view that I'm inherently happy anyway. And all of these things that will come because I'm happy, not the other way around.
I love that, because I've been on my spiritual awakening since 2017. I've been on it my whole life, but I really focused in and said, hey, all right, guys, I'm going to work with you and stop fighting my destiny of being a light worker, because I'm stubborn. The angels put a message on. I had a movie come on, and this is how spirit works with me, because everybody's watched too many movies out there, and they think that angels come down and you got this huge wings and it's got to be a spectacle every day. But angels do that to you when they need to get your attention. You're so close-minded that they got to put on the biggest, brightest light, so you're like, holy, what is this? And they caught your attention. But normally, because I was just on a podcast the other day and they asked me, how do you know you're talking to your angels and how do you know you're speaking to them? How do you see them? Well, I feel them. And this morning they picked out a movie. I've never seen this movie. And this is how spirit works. Right before I got on here with you, I watched this movie. It was made in 2014, and it was a little kids movie, but it was about, I love angel movies, anything about angels. And this little girl is asking for 3 wishes. An angel appeared and gave her 3 wishes. And one of her wishes, she's like 14 or 15, so her wishes are like, I want to stop being picked on and be popular, and I want money and so I can buy clothes. But the angel said, hey, I can give you that. And he looked disappointed, and he said, I'll give you that. It's not going to last, and it's not going to make you feel happy forever. And that was the end of the movie. Stop investing our time into the shallow, into getting the biggest car, having the nicest hair, getting my nails done. If we would stop having that mindset and know that it's okay to have a $1 million house, or you don't have to have that Ferrari to be accepted. Go be nice. Go spread love. I ran into a homeless guy who just happened to be sitting there, and I just walked up to him one day and I said, hey, are you homeless? Because I always ask, because you never know. Some people are just, I asked him, hey, are you homeless? And he said, and I reached in my pocket to give him a couple dollars, and all I had in there was a 5. And I was like, I don't want to give him a 5. And I was like, wait a minute. There's my ego. I said, 5 or $1, what does it matter? It's a piece of paper. Give it to him. So I walked over there and I gave this man the $5 away, and he said, hey, you know what? It's my birthday. And I didn't even know this. Something guided me to want to just talk to this man, not to feel pity for him, but hey, go get yourself some breakfast. I'm notorious for that. And he told me it was his birthday, so I walked over and gave him an even greater gift. I actually gave him a cord cutting and prayed with him on Archangel Michael to help his circumstances. And I would like to run back into that man, because I know that the angels hooked him up. So little off topic of, we'll get back, but I just wanted to throw that in, that angel miracles and spirit present, that's what this whole podcast is they're everyday miracles that you don't have to see some grandiose light spectacle, angel wing come flying in. Just that feeling, that peace that you experienced when you were at your lowest moment. I've felt that, and that's what makes me be a believer and really share the message of love, because I don't care if people believe in angels or not. I want them to believe in the message of love and spirit. And even if we don't believe in them, they believe in us, and they help us every single day. So with that, we're going to ask you my second question. Do you find yourself being more optimistic and less confined by fear since your experience? So do you find yourself just going and doing things and not thinking twice because you're like, you've been at your lowest moment, so, it's all up from here?
Yeah, kind of. There's two things to that. One, I had a conversation this morning with a client, and we talked about this idea that, when you get the opportunity, what I call live in the moment, live in the present, in any given situation. So, depending on who you listen to, Eckhart Tolle would say, live in the now. Everybody has a different variation of the same theme, but, any given point, the amount of money in my bank account, the car on the drive, right now, does that affect me in any way? Is that real in this moment for me? And the answer is no. And so it can't have an impact on what I'm doing, which means that the freedom that comes from, not having to make a decision based on, well, how will that add money to my bank account? Or will that make me feel better? Or not having to make a decision for that, but making a decision because you want to make that decision is the freedom of that is significant, and so, yeah, I do make decisions more freely, but also experience those things of, for want of a better phrase, there's a plan, if you like. All these things happen for a reason, and it's difficult. I know, I've experienced it at times to see what the reason is, but it will become clear at some point in the future that will make perfect sense.
Exactly.
So people say to me now, we talk about the car accident or anything I went through, and I say it makes perfect sense right now. It didn't at the time. There's no way I could make sense of it. But now it makes perfect sense. So I say that to everybody. At some point, what you're going through right now will make perfect sense in the future. And because of that, it gives you freedom to make decisions without the fear of what might happen, simply because before you make a decision, people are always worried about, am I making the right decision, or am I making, I don't want the decision to be the wrong decision. But there's no way of knowing. When you make a decision, it's not right or wrong at that time. The only way the decision is right or wrong is after you've made it. So you can't make a right decision or a wrong decision. You can only make a decision. And whatever happens after that will determine. Now, the problem is that we've got this fear of, if I make the decision and it's wrong, that means something about me, that, inherently that's a problem for me, or an issue for my identity, if you like. It means that I'm doing something wrong. But I don't see it that way. If you make a decision and afterwards it turns out the decision deliver what you expected to deliver, or didn't work out the way you thought it was going to work out, that doesn't necessarily mean the decision was wrong. It just meant that you were supposed to learn that lesson in some way, shape, or form, either for yourself or for somebody else. I don't ever see this idea now that I make a decision and I'm then concerned about what if afterwards, because whatever happens after that point, it was supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I was supposed to learn something from it, or I was supposed to get whatever it was.
Exactly. And I can totally believe that, because that's what my spiritual awakening has taught me. And these past 3 years, I've really been enlightened to, I'm a Pisces, and we're terrible at making decisions. I went into a donut shop and spent I came out with 2 cups of coffee and some donuts and spent $30. And that was the most embarrassing moment in my life, because there was too many decisions. If you do that, I'm like terrible. I'll just get it all because it's too overwhelming for me. But I'm learning, now that I put my faith into spirit, I'm learning that if I make a wrong decision, that's okay, because as long as I learned from it, the angels will it's kind of like, okay, my daughter doesn't learn. She's 9. She's stubborn. She got my stubbornness, and I tell her, don't do that, and she goes ahead and does it, and she won't learn until, I don't ever let her totally hurt herself, but I'm going to be like, don't do that. And if your kid keeps doing it, you're going to let them learn from the experience. That's how we learn. And I've learned that our angels are kind of like our parents. They'll let us go out. They're always with us, but when we decide to go on the lower vibration of things, they can't be there with us. So they just facepalm in the background and wait for us to wake up. But they can't mess around with your free will, but they can shut doors down. So I've learned, if something that I want to have happened, or like I go to a store and somebody's rude, or I wanted a job and they didn't pick me for the interview, I've learned thank you. I've learned to start saying thank you. Wasn't my wrong decision. It was the fact that I didn't need to be there anyways, and if I did make that wrong decision, that's why the door clamped down immediately after I made that wrong decision, so I didn't totally hurt myself. That is very true, and Spirit never, they just want to teach you, because our minds aren't meant to, we don't even use all of our brains like we're supposed to, so we're not meant to know everything either. And humans are so curious. We're so curious of why and when, and we need to know the why and now all the time. What does a daily self-care routine look like for you since your experience? What helps keep your mind, body, and soul balanced so you avoid disruption on keeping going on your current journey?
There's a few things in terms of general physical health and well-being. I always had what I would call a level of fitness routine, whether it was out running or in the gym, play golf regularly. But since lockdown in March this year, yoga, and that was something I'd never tried before. We wanted to do something different. I absolutely love it. I'm not a big fan. Again, I was talking about this very recently. I'm not a big fan of this kind of, like the 6 a.m. club, or you've got to do this in this order. No. I have 3 or 4 things that I do on a daily basis. I do yoga. I'll do some form of exercise. I'll meditate, and I'll read, or I'll listen to audio of some type. They are my kind of 4 things. They don't always have to happen in between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. There are days, depending on what I'm doing, I'm very much more in touch intuitively now, in terms of if I don't feel right at that particular point, I won't do it then. I might do it later on when things change. So, but those kind of 3 or 4 things are the key things that I do on a daily basis. But I don't just read for reading's sake. This is the other thing I think that I've learned over the years, is that too many people suffer from what I call shelf development. So they read books and just put them on the shelf, and they've got, a bookshelf full of books, but they've never actually implemented anything that they've learned in any of the books. Read with an intention. So I read a book if I want to learn something specific. And if I want to learn something specific, then I'll read it and I'll try and implement something from what I'm reading. A book at the minute, and I've probably been reading it now for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months. And people will say, well, why are you still reading the same book? But I now read, because I'm reading intentionally, I'll read something and then I might go back to that same chapter and read it 3 or 4 times and pick out the bits that really resonate with me, or I try and understand, or I might even read something else around the same subject. Now I've read something in that chapter. Just try on a daily basis and have those 3 or 4 things. I think the biggest change completely for me is this, what I call this knowing. So this position of being happy, calm, at peace, knowing that things will go the way they're supposed to go, regardless of what I do, essentially, as long as I'm taking action towards them. Then from that perspective, I find my days are much easier. I'm not stressed about most of the things that most people get stressed about. And the other thing, a big learning for me, is something that I teach a lot to people as well, is this idea that the event itself has no inherent meaning. Something very simple happens. I was doing some work recently with a sales team for a company, and they were talking about rejection. So when a client rejects and says, no, I don't want to buy. And I said, well, if we took that as an event, if your client doesn't buy from you, what does that mean? What's the meaning of that? The consequence was they didn't buy, so you didn't make a sale, but what's the meaning? And they were a little bit lost for a period of time. And I was like, well, the reason you're struggling is because there isn't a meaning except for the meaning that we give it. So what happens is the client doesn't buy from you, and you say, well, that means I'm not very good at my job, or that means I must be a rubbish salesperson, so you've now made up a meaning that didn't exist in that event. Yeah. And we do it all the time. And so one of the big lessons for me is understanding that events have no meaning means that as soon as something happens, whatever the event is, I can quickly ask myself, well, what does that mean? And it stops you in your tracks almost, because then it's like, well, actually, it doesn't mean anything. I don't really know anything other than the actual outcome of the event. and it gives you freedom to move on without, the fear of rejection or the pain that comes with some of the things that go on. So that's something that I implement on a daily basis. It just helps me look at things from a completely different perspective.
Nice. Then that's my biggest thing, because I'm a spiritual grounding coach, and I help people, and most of the time I find it the biggest thing is they don't know how to relax during their day. Their their thoughts and their fears have overcome their mind so much. It's not that they can't, that they're not worthy, that they're not good at doing stuff. I've found that most of the problem with people is they don't have any confidence in themselves, and that's because nobody couldn't just be like, hey, words can do a million things. Just by saying a couple words of encouragement to someone, you can change their whole life, depending on how high of a pedestal they have you in their mind. By you just simply saying, you're doing a good job, just believe in yourself. Those are like magic words, and that person will run around, for the rest of their life being inspired. I love it that you have a daily routine, because it is really important, not so much the timeline that you do it in, but that you do it. And that's what I tell people. If you have that hard of a time doing it, do an hour power, 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night. That's when you wake up. You spend 30 minutes with yourself, doing whatever you want to do, listening to music, whatever sets up your day. And then 30 minutes at night. Close off your day, reflect on it. Don't just go to sleep with all that. Take a shower, wash off everybody's energy that you have absorbed. I've learned these little tricks in my life. Like, I'm so much more calmer because I've been wound up like a firecracker my whole life. And then I inherited my dad's anger and his energy, the not being able to express stuff. Thankfully, Spirit decided, hey, we're going to stop it at this generation. So that's, there's hope for you guys out there. If you don't like your reality, change it, because it's really that simple. It is harder to put action behind it, but if you keep telling yourself that every day, you're eventually going to get the choo-choo train to get you up to believing. It depends on how far down you are. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up with you. I love this whole discussion. It's beautiful because Spirit brings people. This whole broadcast, I feel, is Spirit-led, and people that are coming here to share their stories, and people like you, I love it that you have such a beautiful message and you inspire people. And I know you're going to inspire a lot of men out there with your story, because it's a simple thing of having more men. And I've noticed that more men are stepping up and saying, hey, this is not okay to be bullied because we have feelings. I'm glad that mindset's going away.
Yeah,
So what is the most important takeaway you have for our audience about the power of Spirit and the beautiful miracles that it contains?
I think, some of the things I've learned, one of my big takeaways that links back to everything is that every moment, every event is either an opportunity or an obstacle. And we get to decide which it is. So in 2008, when I lost my business, all I could see was obstacles. I could only ever see, why is this happening to me? If this happens, that's now going to be a problem. And yet, I also now, looking back, know that in 2008, there were companies launched which are now billion-dollar brands. So during the time I was losing a business, there were companies starting in the worst financial crisis ever, gone on to be hugely successful. So they saw an opportunity in the time when I saw an obstacle. So one of the things I often talk about is this idea that obstacles, when we look up, we see these things. I imagine like the guy in the hurdles in the Olympics, when they look up from the start line and they look up, all they see are these hurdles in front of them. But the question is, are those hurdles in the way, or are they on the way to where he needs to go? And it's something that stuck with me a lot, in this idea that, well, they're on the way. So every experience I have is on the way to where I need to be. And this idea, as I said earlier on, that I can't make a right or a wrong decision, whether there's an obstacle there or whether it's an opportunity, it makes zero difference to the end point of where I'm going, because I trust that my path is laid for me, that I'm going to experience the things that I need to experience at the times I need to experience them in my life for me to end up where I'm supposed to be.
Nice.
And it's the biggest thing, I think, that's changed for me, is this knowing, this trusting that these things are going to happen, and whatever it is that's happening is supposed to happen for a reason that I may not yet be able to determine. But having been through enough of those events over my life, I now know that everything will be okay. I'm supposed to experience them, and wherever I'm supposed to be at the end, I'll be, because that's the way it's supposed to lay out.
Well, I love it, and I love your attitude. Where can our viewers out there get a hold of you if they would like to hire you as a coach, or, you know, just have a breakthrough call with you?
Okay, so they can get me at my website, which is deanafox.com. And I'm on all the social channels. So on Facebook and Instagram, you can get me at Dean Fox Coaching. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. People can message me directly through the website. They can reach out. They can book calls directly from there too. If people, you know, want to start a conversation, I have a free strategy call as well. So if people want to reach out and have an initial conversation to find out a little bit more about them and me and see if we're a fit, then, you know, there's the ability for them to be able to do that, as well as some free resources on the site too.
I wanted to mention a resource we have in the USA if you are having a difficult time right now and you really can't get out of your head and you don't know who to talk to, because I've been there. Fear holds you back of judgment. So I do want to mention we have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline here in America. The number is 800-273-8255. All these links will be in the comments section as well. Do you have any resources out there?
Yeah, we do. We have two. So there's a national helpline, which is currently run by an organisation called the Samaritans in the UK, and they have a dedicated line. Their number's 116123. You can dial it from any UK phone. There's also a charity run by the Health Service called SANE, SANE. And you can Google them. They have resources on their website as well. But both of those are resources dedicated to people who have either got mental health problems or are just feeling low and really need somewhere to turn.
Awesome. Well, I really think those are important right now because, you know, the world is in crisis right now. People are hunkered down. I've noticed, you know, with my Facebook groups, I've noticed a change in just the sadness out there. So I want you guys to know it can get better, but it's not going to get better until you decide to change which pair of glasses you're going to look through your world in. Because I've been at the bottom and I've been at the top, and it really, I've learned that it's all about how I'm perceiving the world around me. And is my obstacle really that hard, or am I just making it it's kind of like the kid who's holding on the rope and he thinks he's drowning, and then there's like 2 inches of water there. So thank you so much for being on our show today, Dean. I really appreciate you being a guest.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you again for the invite. I'm always blessed and grateful to have an opportunity to share a bit of my story and hopefully have an impact on somebody somewhere.
Yes, and I feel that you definitely will have an impact, because the angels are going to get your message to who really needs to hear it today. So, well, there you have it, beautiful souls. Another hour of angelic miracles that you have just personally witnessed. I have goosebumps. I've had goosebumps this whole broadcast. My angels are definitely surrounding this beautiful podcast. I would like to take a moment, as I'm going to at the end of each broadcast, and I would like to express gratitude to all my archangels and my spirit team and my creator as we wrap up this podcast. I want to say thank you to my angels and say thank you for always being there, even when I had a hard time believing. Thank you. And thank you, beautiful souls, for tuning in to another miracle-filled episode of Your Angels Are Talking. Are you listening? Tune in next week to share in on more of the love and miracles that our angels create for us daily. This is Jess, Intuitive Angel Healer, here, sending all of you beautiful souls love and light out there and healing angel vibes. Until we meet again next time, take care. Love and light, everybody.